November 6th, 2018. And present are Christina and Benji. No one suggested any issues that they particularly want reviewed. So we are going to look at the issues that are tagged with either needs usability review or needs UX review.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hi.
Oh, Suzanne, hello. Welcome to the meeting. We were just, sorry about the tunnel view. There we go. That looks better. I think there's only supposed to be one tag, needs usability review, but there seems to be a second tag, needs UX review. I wonder if we could declare those to be synonyms. But anyway, I searched and found a bunch of issues, several of which are in the needs review state, some of which haven't been looked at in a while. Are you joining? Is there something you'd like to bring up, Suzanne?
No, I just did this user testing last week of all other content management systems, and I have all these results already with not that many users. So I was thinking, the whole point of it was to get data for the admin UI initiative, but I was thinking there's probably other places in the ecosystem where I should share this. So
that's great.
That's why I thought I should join.
Okay, I do know that 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was someone asking on the UX channel in Slack. He was a student somewhere saying he was looking to do usability study and was looking for ideas on things to test.
Wow, okay.
I chatted with him a little bit and haven't heard from him recently, but I don't know, maybe if you can describe what you've done, that will help him, or maybe we'll find someone else. So you are looking for other people to repeat the same test, or do you just want to present results?
There'll probably be a follow-up study needed. So yeah.
Okay. Do you want to share your screen and show us what you found?
Oh, sure.
And then we'll end the tunnel effect.
So, okay, here it is. Let me share which screen am I sharing? Am I sharing my screen now? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So, we're this in here already. I don't think I put it in the shared drive yet. So, so Christina knows about this already because we've been talking about it on the other meeting. But basically, we set up 4 CMSs: Squarespace, Contentful, WordPress with Gutenberg enabled, and Craft CMS. And then we had users go in and create content. And they gave their initial impressions, they created content, they put the content through a workflow to preview it and publish it and then delete it. And then we had a few other tasks like adding an image and adding a quote. And then we asked for their follow-up impressions, and then we asked them at the end to compare and what they thought of the experience. So we got a lot of specific feedback about particular UI elements. So things like in Craft CMS, there's this edit form that starts on the initial dashboard, and people really liked it, but it was a very constricting experience. So we got feedback on things like that. I think we got a lot of really good feedback on the what people thought of the workflow of each one, like where things like the
what is that? This dashboard that you were showing?
Oh, sorry. This was Craft CMS.
And that thing, what you were saying about the dashboard is that they start creating content just with a title.
Like
a quick way to do that?
A quick way to add content directly from the first page. So people were doing this kind of thing, but then if you start actually creating a lot of things, and they liked this a lot. The kind of, to me, it's a kind of paragraph style content build experience. Anyway, so this form gets kind of long. So pros and cons of this, we got some feedback on. Also, a lot of feedback on the different experiences for previewing content. So for example, in Craft CMS, if you're editing content and you do a live preview, it shows you the content on the right. And people found this really natural, like nobody really was, it was the first time they had all seen the interface and they all immediately kind of understood what was going on. But a lot of the workflows for taking content through the process of publication was not always clear depending on where the buttons were. So that was just something I think to take out, just so that when we're creating new, for at least the new admin UI, like depending on where we locate, like the proximity of the buttons for previewing and editing and deleting and publishing and all of that, like it was pretty clear that people look on the right and that the buttons should all be in the same area. So we should make sure that preview and publish are close to each other, that kind of thing.
Can you show us where they are now?
In the new admin UI?
No, right here in this.
Oh, in here. Okay, so in these ones, let's see. So for this one, once you've saved something, so for example here, you are able to go and save as a draft, but it's not clear that this content is already published. So when we said, oh, save this as a draft, or publish this content, some people maybe had already published the content unknowingly, and then they didn't realize that it was already published. So they were looking at these kind of, clicking on this button, clicking on these buttons, and they were confused, and they couldn't see that the content was published. So that's an example.
Where does it show whether it's published?
Yeah, it doesn't. It's published. It doesn't say published like in really clearly. So that was a problem with this.
And how do you switch to the preview that you were showing before?
This live preview link here.
So then you have both. Okay.
Yeah, so then you have both. So even though people found having the preview show up like this, like once they clicked on show live preview, people really liked this, but the rest of the process for publishing and seeing that you were editing a draft versus something that's published, that was less clear for people.
Okay.
In this interface. People found that the WordPress interface for publishing was easier to use. So I think just having the like the buttons in the same place here helped with that. But one thing that people didn't like with the workflow for WordPress was, or not that they didn't like, but that they were confused by, was the phrase move to trash. People thought that then they had to go empty the trash. So I think just a simple delete button would be better, which is, I think, what Drupal does now anyway. So we got feedback on that kind of button placement and just general workflow for. For Contentful, there was a workflow where you have to unpublish something before you can delete it, and there's a couple different drop downs for doing that. And again, people were quite confused by this interface. So the workflow was more prescribed, and it was less obvious. And then in terms of just the overall editing interface, there was a mixture of feedback. So some people really liked the Gutenberg style or Squarespace style editing. I think people really liked the fact that when you pasted in the content, it looked good right away, like it looked formatted already. But people were also found it easy to use the Craft CMS style editor, where you build content using more traditional fields, an interface like this, and with the Squarespace WordPress style, pasting in the content they found easy, but adding new components did not seem easier than in Craft CMS. So it wasn't conclusive like which people really preferred. And then also something that we noticed was that in the UI for something like Gutenberg, people really like how this looks, and they have the impression that they're actually editing the front end of the website, and then they go to publish something anyway, and then look at it on the live site. How do we do that?
Preview, maybe?
Preview. Thank you. How many times did I watch people do this? And then it looks different and maybe not as good. So it was almost like, disappointing, like, oh, that's how it looks. So people were really thinking like, this is what my content is going to look like.
Wow.
And in terms of the UI for adding new elements, so for this one, the interface, you have these plus buttons. So some people found these and started using them. I think it was relatively natural. In the Squarespace version of this, there is a plus button somehow at the bottom of the editor, and nobody was able to find it. So every single person we had to show them. I think my Squarespace sample site has expired, but basically it was like an interface like this, where you have this nice looking editor, and then the plus button was further down the editor at the bottom right-hand corner. And it was very subtle, like a gray plus icon, and people were not finding it.
So did you actually have to scroll to see that icon?
You didn't have to scroll. It was in the editor, but it was just not somehow easy to see. So we had to point it out to people. So it was just it was surprising to me, because I thought that this was an easy to use editor, but clearly there was some usability issues. Although I'm sure once you find it, it's not going to be something you have to hunt for every time. So there's lots of other really detailed feedback in this spreadsheet. So I was starting to write up some conclusions, and I was planning to take some more screenshots of the UI so that I can make a post that's easier to go through. and just have some takeaways of what we can learn. And then also to follow up, I guess a next step would be to do maybe another version of the study with some more advanced content. The content that we had people create in the study, it was just an article. So the content, we gave them a Google Doc like this with a title and an image, and then just a link basically in the content. And we asked them to make some text bold and make it a quote. So it's really basic editing, like editing an article. So I was thinking it would make more sense, make sense as a follow-up to maybe test adding more complex content, either landing page style content or more
recipe.
Like recipe, like a structured content.
That sounds really interesting, because actually those are the two opposite situations that we actually have: the super structured content, and the landing page where you can actually pick different kind of blocks or pieces of content.
I found like Contentful people had a lot of trouble using because it uses Markdown. So there were, and it's very developer focused. Like if you just go to the dashboard, it's written like if you just, people start to read this text and they see like, oh, this is talking about hooks, and right away they are kind of thinking this is more for developers. So I might drop this one from the next round just because that feedback already seemed to be there. I don't know. It takes a lot. It took a full hour to test the 4 CMSs for each person. So if we are trying to test more complex content, it might be useful to narrow down what we're testing to maybe only two or 3.
I'm sorry, you said it took 1 hour for one user to test all 4?
Yeah. Just to create an article, and they talked through what they were doing. They gave some initial impressions and then the feedback afterwards. So the whole thing took about an hour per person. So if we do like more like structured content, it will probably take longer.
Makes sense.
So that's why I was thinking narrow it down to only maybe 3 CMSs.
Yeah, I agree.
But then again, like creating a recipe, adding that functionality to Squarespace, WordPress, and Craft CMS. I think like Craft CMS is flexible. WordPress is flexible if you add plugins, and Contentful is very flexible. To Squarespace, I don't think is. So maybe we will have to drop that.
Makes sense.
So we'll see, I guess.
So looking at this page, I see some little green icons in the left, and to the extent that they're suggested, that's a good idea. I wonder about this background and the little bluish sketch in the right of the good afternoon block.
Yeah.
Do people have an opinion about these? Do they make it look more friendly? Do they make it look more cluttered?
Oh, good question. Nobody mentioned those. Like nobody said nice icons. I think people just saw words like locales and webhooks and weren't sure what those meant, and they just focused on that.
I think you only see that the first time that you have to start like a new site where you still need all these things. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But you don't see that always.
Similarly, like on the one for Craft CMS on the dashboard, there's Craft News over on the right, and people specifically mentioned like this takes up too much space. I don't need that.
What's Craft News?
Oh, it would be like putting
Drupal news?
Update about Drupal 8.6 on the dashboard.
Oh.
So I guess you can customize this, I think, to remove it, but obviously nobody's doing that. Nobody said, "Oh yeah, you can remove it." So I don't think people would take the time to do that. So that, I mean, that's just a small thing.
Okay.
Oh, one really interesting thing for the content overview page was on this content overview page, and I thought about it, Christina, because we were talking about the buttons and the gray buttons versus the blue buttons.
Yeah.
So here, several people said, "Oh, I want to create news," and they went here and they went to pick news, and then they were like, "What do I do next?" Because they were looking at this as the action, like blue is the action, and they were trying to do an action here, and they didn't even realize it was a filter. Instead of going, and then afterwards they went over here and realized, oh, I have to add an entry. So that was one thing I noticed, which would really support your change to make the blue. I think the secondary icon buttons you had were blue, or they were like a white and blue. To switch those to just gray.
Yeah, because just as a context, the first designs that we made, or what we thought that were the final buttons after a lot of iterations, were the primary button was blue, the secondary button was a ghost blue button, which is a white or transparent background with a border with blue and the text in blue. And then the tertiary button. And then we realized that what we actually need is not a primary and secondary button. What we need is the default button and a primary action, which means that we probably end up with 20 buttons in the page that need to be perceived as buttons, but doesn't take too much to attention, and also don't compete with the primary if there's a primary button. So that's a main point, that we didn't need a secondary, but what we need was a normal instead of a part of the primary. Okay, so
when you come up with your summary, do you think you're going to have do's and don'ts or actionable advice for Drupal?
I'm gonna try and have some, yeah. I had a ton of notes. I'm also gonna have some quotes that were really good, like people's reactions to specific things. So I'll try and make it not too long so that it's more useful, and I'll try and put in screenshots with notes on them so that it's more easy for people to process the results. So I had asked for, I'm going to Drupal Camp Atlanta this week, and I have a content strategy training that I'm doing. So I'm hoping to get some content editors to sign up to do some more user testing from that.
That's great.
And then I can either, I don't know if I need to run the same study again, because 4 people is not that many for a study. So I might just try and run it again to try and see if there's anything new, just with a few more people.
At least that actually gives a really good base to plan. If we think a bigger study with even more people around the world, with the people with the database of people that we have. So that's a really useful thing.
Yeah. Great. So I think we could run it online, and it takes a lot of time and patience to run. Like, my I did it with my colleague Annika, and she was doing the script. So she was very patient to tell people what to do and not help them, but, you know, tell them what they needed. And then occasionally we did have to help people because we only had an hour with each one. So like having that balance, like it was quite challenging actually, just to do the 4 hours. So I think it would be good to do the study more, but I also want to be realistic about how much resources that takes. And the fact that like if somebody just says, oh, I'm going to do user testing, like it's actually challenging to do. So you might have a hard time doing it. Like, and having 2 people there was essential to be able to take the notes and everything. So like it's something I think it would make sense to do another couple small rounds like this and see how much we can get out of that.
Okay, makes sense.
And then maybe for something like from that testing, from those small tests, if we are able to create some wireframes and then those maybe put through a bigger test where we have specific things that we want to figure out, maybe that would be more useful and then easier to run because you're only testing one thing and not 4.
The whole, yeah, that makes sense. That's cool.
I bet that having 2 people also made it good to transition from one tester to the next. So there's probably a little bit of overlap while you had 2 testers there and there were 2 of you, so one of you could talk to each, or did it not? Was there not any overlap?
Yeah, I mean, there was a point where we were running late, so if somebody comes to the door, just logistical things. And then she's the designer who she's not technical, she's not like a Drupal developer, so that's good, first of all, because she's less biased than me. So having her run the test was great, but then having me there to make sure, like, okay, if something happens, like at one point, you know, there's a page not found, and like, you know, you just like help the person when they need it. Like it's just really helpful to have 2 people. Anyway.
And I guess once you're at the stage of coming up with wireframes and have specific questions that you want to ask, I think the tests will be a lot shorter once you're more focused, and also 4 people is about enough.
Yeah.
Once you have something specific that you're testing for, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, so I guess what we can do is share this recording tomorrow with Eton, so we don't have to explain that again.
Yeah, and then I'll spend some time doing the write-up because I think that'll be easier to digest once it's kind of written down.
Yeah, probably. Okay. Oh, thank you for the update.
Yes, thanks for showing us that. And does look like a lot of work. And you're not done yet.
Usually the meeting is like people coming in with different projects, or just getting feedback, or what's the usual format?
Often there's an issue that someone's working on actively and they want to get a review from the UX team before it gets committed. Currently we're in a lull. There hasn't been much of that for a few weeks.
Oh, okay.
So we've gone after a couple of issues that we're interested in. And in the absence of any of that, I was just going to go through the list of issues that are marked as needing a usability review, and at least get an idea of what they need to move them forward.
Right. There was one issue that came up again and again in the surveys, and then again in this study I noticed auto-saving is a big deal. Like for content editors, they have so much anxiety about auto-saving. And there's an issue on Drupal.org. I have it on my, I put it somewhere in my Slack so I wouldn't lose the issue. It's like, it's one of those old issues. Where is it? Oh yeah. Am I still sharing my screen?
Yeah.
Yes. So for the Hangout recording, can you read the issue number?
Oh yeah, it's 153313. So in a lot of the survey results, people mentioned autosave, and then I noticed in this test I just ran that every time people had any kind of, like I told them to preview the content or publish the content or anything, they were very anxious about the content being lost. And one or two of the platforms, has a little note that says this was last saved at this time, and that was very reassuring. So it seems like a big deal for content editors. I don't know what the status of this issue is, but I know there's been some things suggested.
Well, it's been 2 years since anybody has done.
Anyway,
That's cool. I think that it's going to happen almost for sure, because I've heard people from the JavaScript side talking about that. I'm not really sure if they have already developed anything or not, but at least that's a plan, almost for sure. Something that actually has Figma, the design tool that I'm using, is it actually has the button to save, but it auto saves. So when you click on save, it says, that's okay, you already have the content saved, but if you feel better just clicking here, that's fine. That's funny, but it's important for what Susan is saying, to keep people not anxious about being able to save or not. That's interesting. Okay. So then, should we jump to any other issue?
Yeah, why don't we at least have a look? So I guess this is sorted by last updated. And just looking at the first one that's marked as needs review, editing a media entity now always redirects you to a media overview list. So that's marked as a regression. So I've already opened that. Motivation, this, I guess, recently fixed issue, redirect back to media list after creating a media entity caused a fairly serious regression for an unknown percentage of site admins. Although the title and all the discussion focused on redirect after creating a media entity, the patch that landed took this media form save, such that all uses of a media form, including edit, get this forced redirect. So the intention was, after creating a new media, to get redirected, and it seems that after editing an existing one, they're also redirected. Step to reproduce, navigate, blah, blah, blah. So you have to be looking at the page for the media entity, click the Edit tab, and press Save. And then the expected behavior is that you would return to the View tab, but instead you're taken to the media listing.
Is there any screenshot down on the comment?
Well, let me just scroll and look for screenshots. I don't see any.
Is that because sometimes there is no view, like a view mode for a media item?
I believe there is. That's what they're saying in this step 1 to reproduce. Navigate to media entity's canonical root, the full page view. Admittedly, this is the rare step, but it happens. And the fact that media entities have a canonical view root means we need to support this case.
Mm.
And content editor assumptions, view, edit, view is good. Somewhere else to edit to somewhere else is also good. And view and then edit and go somewhere else is bad. So proposed resolution, 1 is to revert the recently committed issue. B is fix the logic added there so that it only happens on new entities. There are patches for both of those. C, add a setting. Say where you go after save. Separate bundle settings, site-wide config setting, other. So that's what the issue summary has. And I think one of the recent comments said that they updated it.
I'm usually in favor of per bundle settings in most of the entities. So whichever we decide, I would say it should be editable, or it should be configurable. Yeah, for each. So I think option, I'm not sure if it goes C or D right now. Separate per bundle settings for redirect after add versus edit. I don't know, I feel like this won't make sense. Because C is sharing the redirect for add when you're creating a new one and when you're editing an existing one. And I don't think you want the same.
I kind of lean towards option B and say that this, we just have to restrict this behavior to when the media item we're adding is new rather than so that it, we'll get the old behavior if we're editing an existing media item.
Yeah, that's acceptable too. I mean, that makes sense too.
Oh, and I should, for the sake of the recording, this is issue 3009114.
Yeah, so if you read comment 6, it says that we will prefer the configurable one. It seems that we discussed that a month ago.
Well, I don't remember discussing this. So maybe I should look at the parent issue, or the maybe that will jog my memory if we actually discussed it in the UX team. Aha, here's a comment from you, Christina.
What?
So this is issue 2974203.
That's a lot of months ago. I don't have that many memory. Okay.
So I guess.
Yeah, but it's not saying.
We discussed this in the UX meeting back in July. Okay, well, I also would not remember that far back.
Yeah, but it's just ignoring the situation where you are creating a new element. So it's not. Yeah, it doesn't take in. It doesn't takes into account the situation where you are actually viewing the media in its own URL, and then you edit, and then you want to go back to the same view. So that's just a situation where that we didn't even take into account. And that's the main problem on the other issue.
Well, I'm inclined to look at some of the GIFs or GIFs that were attached. Where did I see that? There we go. So we add media, we choose which type of media, we select a photo, we give it a name, we add some alt text, and we save. And then this is the canonical route, the main page for the media item, and then we have to go back to content and /media to find our media library and add a new one. I assume that we're almost done with this recording. Yes. No. Yeah, that was the end, and now it's looping. And then here's the screencast after. Presumably we'll start off the same way. Media, choose image type media, select a photo, give it a name, give it some alt text, and save. And we're redirected back to the media library. So it does look as though on the parent issue, they did not consider other ways of getting to the media edit form.
Yeah, that's the thing. So the other issue is about if you are in the detail view of a media item and you click to edit, when you save, you'll probably expect to just stay on the view again, as it will happen in a node. And instead of that, this patch here, what it's making is getting you to the media listing page. So that's a problem. And we should decide if we want to send people by default when they are creating a new media to the listing page, or we should consider having different settings per bundle, or I don't know. I don't remember the other options.
Scroll to the top of the page. So I'm inclined to think that, that more configuration is not really a good solution. I think the suggestion here is reasonable, that if you're if you can detect where you're coming from, and it's the media library, and you're creating a new thing, then I think it does make a lot of sense to go back to the media library when you're done. On the other hand, if you're coming from sort of the view tab on the media entity itself, then I would expect to go back there when I'm done. There's some discussion here of using the destination parameter, and maybe there are some technical problems with that, but maybe that's the right approach to use.
So the main difference is when you are editing something that is already created, or you are creating a new element.
So I guess I'm suggesting that that this should be handled by explicitly putting in destination parameters. Just from briefly reading the discussion, I guess that there are technical problems with that the destination parameter gets lost at some point. But surely it's that technical problem can be solved. And then the button on the media library, that button couldn't include a destination parameter telling you to return to the media library when you're done. And the link on the when you're viewing the edit, the tab to the maybe that should be the default, that when you go to the tab to edit and save, maybe the default should be that you go back to the view page, as it was before the parent issue was committed. So maybe that parent issue was just solved in the wrong way, and it should have been solved by adding a destination parameter to the link, the button styled link on the media library, the add new media button.
Exactly. You add new, so you go back to media because it's a parameter. It makes sense. Yeah.
So trying to find, where does it say consistent?
Yeah. What are you looking for?
No, this is the comment I was looking for. After discussion with the UX team, the choice was made to keep behavior consistent. I'm guessing, but I'm not sure, that he's referring to discussion back in July on the parent issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, we can just start the conclusion we just said, right? Not sure if it solves it, but it's true.
All right, so we're actually running out of time.
Yeah.
So I guess I will add a comment to this issue saying that we looked at it briefly. I'll emphasize that we're not giving any sort of final decision. That it seems reasonable that the parent issue should not have affected this case, and that the right way forward seems to be to solve the technical problems with losing the destination parameter. Does that sound like a reasonable thing to say?
Yeah, I mean, for me, if I had to say that, it wouldn't be like a technical way of explaining that. I would just say I want to go back where I came from. So yeah, that's
okay.
We agree.
Good. I will add that follow-up, and I'll post a link to the recording as soon as it's available, and I'll also tweet it. And thank you for participating.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.